Well, welcome, everyone. This is Critical Conversations. Critical Conversations, I work for a ministry called BeBroken. BeBroken Ministries helps men, women, and families move from sexual wholeness, or I get that one wrong all the time, sexual brokenness to wholeness in Christ, and we also equip others to do the same. So as a ministry, we help men who struggle with unwanted sexual behavior. We help wives who are dealing with betrayal trauma of their husband's behavior. And then we also work with parents and helping parents with what are some helpful ways to raise your kids in a way that they can kind of survive this culture, right? But not only survive, but also live their lives in God. And in a healthy way, especially when it comes to emotions and sexuality, which of course includes their bodies, right? And then we also work with churches and counselors and do some training with them as well in this area. So I'm excited to be able to share this with you all today. So Critical Conversations, this is based off of our book, Honest Talk. This was written by John Fort. I work with John. John's a good friend. John's the expert. I'm the mouthpiece today. But it's material that I've learned well and know well, so hopefully we'll have some good conversations and questions. But what I want you to know is everything I teach today, I'm still learning how to do with my kids. And actually I use BeBroken's resources all the time to help me with my kids, right? Because this is a growing process, this is a learning process. We're not talking about perfection, but we're talking about relationships. So the key thing as we look at Critical Conversations is it's really about building that relationship with your kids intentionally for their spiritual health and their sexual health and their emotional health. So here we go. I'm going to say words and use words that you may never have heard in a church building before. Sacrifices of God are a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. That's really the theme verse of this ministry of BeBroken as we're in our 21st year as a ministry. So, what is our expectation when we think about talking to our kids about sexuality? Like, what feelings start to well up inside of you? How, right? Maybe terror, right? What do we think our kids are going to do? Right? There's this kind of fear, right? And so hopefully what this is going to do is it's going to kind of build a foundation so that this doesn't necessarily happen, right? Now, that doesn't mean there's not going to be awkward conversations, but a way to do it in a age appropriate and healthy and helpful. So, in 2018, we took a survey about why parents don't talk to their kids about sexuality. Because if you're anything like my generation, like my parents, my dad had one conversation with me, and that was forced because the school was going to start doing sex ed, so they realized they had to do something, right? So we took this survey, and these are the answers that the parents gave. It might strain our relationship. I will ruin my child's innocence. My kids might find out about my past. It'll be too much work. Now, interestingly, only dad said number 4. Which I get, right? Like, it is a lot of work, especially if we don't necessarily have guidance in how to do it, right? We see all this stuff, and we're like, oh, like, how do I fit this in? But really, I want to look at all of these to show that these are, yes, legitimate fears that we have, but it's not going to strain our relationship. It's not going to ruin their innocence. And it's actually not a bad thing if your kids know about your mistakes. Because then they're going to know how you turn to God in those mistakes. In 2020, we did an anonymous survey of 30 teenagers from Christian families. We did not give them options. It was actually here, tell us the answer to this question. What do you fear about talking to your parents about sexuality? So we got answers from them without leading them in anything. Every single kid gave one or both of these two answers. And that was it. Parents won't understand how I feel. I'll get in trouble for what I say or ask. Now notice what's not on that list. I'll get in trouble for what I did or do. It's what I'm going to say or ask. So I'm going to show you a video. This video is actually the grown-up son of John Fort, the author of this book and of this presentation. He's now, I don't remember how old he is in the video, but he and his wife are, I think, pregnant with their second child, so John is now a grandfather. And but it's interesting, John and his children, he has a daughter and a son, really, he helped them, grow them up in this area. And so his son Lucas now actually does a lot of talking and teaching as well.
A few things that adults fear about talking about this is you guys are afraid, maybe your kids won't talk. Or maybe you're a bad example because you also struggle with pornography or anything sexual like that. But the truth is that your kids would rather hear from you, especially if you've messed up. Because right now, if they've messed up or have been looking at pornography or struggling with something or confused, they're feeling like, oh my gosh, no one understands me, like who am I going to talk to? But if you come as their parents and are telling them, hey, I understand, I went through the exact same things, and tell your own stories and your own struggles and your own solutions, and that's going to make them feel a lot more comfortable and feel relaxed and like, oh my gosh, somebody understands me, and hey, it's my parents who understand me. And I think that's a really good thing.
Right, and that's going to be a key thing that we're going to be talking about, right? Like we want our kids to realize, hey, it's my parents that understand and know and want to know me, right? That's the relationship we want them to really hang on to. So, who or what is shaping your child's sexuality? A lot of things. Now, John always tells me when I do this presentation, I'm not supposed to hang on this slide for a long time because I don't want to scare parents. I don't listen to John. There's a lot of things out there that our children are being faced with, and it gets worse and worse, right? Like this is serious, right? There's a lot out there, and it's not just big corporations going after our kids. It's kids going after each other, not maliciously, right? The big corporations, yeah. But kids are going to share with their friends, right, with what they know. So they're going to get it from all different angles that are out there. All right, so a quick poll. We'll raise our hands for this one. Or I guess raise your hand if you want to answer. What were things that influenced your sexuality and how you thought about sex as a child? Who wants to share with the group? Phil.
Melrose Place.
Melrose Place. Ooh. Okay, right.
I show that.
So I was telling my table when I was at that when I was real young, I was like in 4th or 5th grade, maybe 3rd grade through 5th grade. I had some twin neighbors who moved down the street, and their dad owned an adult bookstore. The entire house was filled with just smut everywhere. And I remember going to their house one time only, because I told my parents about it, I never went back to their house, but we used to play outside the house, but I just couldn't imagine having that kind of, it was like literally the guy's bedroom was literally, you could walk on a stack of stuff just everywhere in the room. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so, and that was kids. These are little youngsters. Mm-hmm. So parents, and it might be the TV, but it might just be what's around them.
Yeah. Maris, did you get your hand up?
Morris.
Oh, I thought I was right that time too.
Porn.
Yeah. Yep. Jessica Rabbit. Anyone else?
I know Baywatch was a...
Baywatch, there we go. We're all dating ourselves.
That was on Sunday afternoons.
I thought I lived like a really squeaky clean childhood because like I only watched like Nick at Night, like old time shows, and listened to like old music from like the 60s and 70s. It seemed so innocent, and just listening to this stuff now, it's like the ideas of like womanhood and romance and like, oh, it's just, I didn't think that I was being sexually molded by that stuff, but I for sure was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you grew up a huge Beatles fan. Beatles are incredibly misogynistic, or are for whoever, which ones are still are, right? Right? And it's so easy. It just kind of folds into the culture.
MTV.
MTV,
Yeah.
when they used to have music videos.
Yeah.
Mine was an after school special. That was the first.
Yeah?
I remember I never thought about it until my mom made me watch an after school special, and it was about pornography actually,
Okay.
and children. But there was no conversation afterwards. It was just like, now you know what not to do, who not to trust, but.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd also add James Bond and his persona. You know, he's a tough, masculine man. He kicks ass, but also he finds this babe, and
Right.
he goes off in the sunset. And, you know, that's skipping over a bunch of details, of course, but that's the general.
And a new one every movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Matt?
I remember classmates, like, because I went to a Catholic grade school up until 8th grade, and then went to like a, public high school. And I remember moving, even at that age, there were sexually active people in my grade.
Mm-hmm.
And here, like, moving from the Catholic school, like, didn't even realize that was possible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say classmates, other friends, learning from them, and also just the public school health class.
Yeah. Now,
Romance novels.
romance novels, Danielle Steele, right? Christina or Philip?
Well, I was gonna piggyback off of them, your closest friends, friend. And then, to piggyback off Matushka, the grocery store. Just the imagery on, you can see the books and magazines in line, like, I remember, yeah.
So the one answer I did not hear, a little bit from Christina, was parents. Right? Christina, okay, they sat you down in front of TV for something, but it was still TV, right? Which is kind of what you said, right? So none of us in this room, at least from what we said, could say, well, parents, which is the answer we want, right?
Right.
Okay, so critical conversations. So here's our outline for our time together. Hopefully, we'll be able to take away some of the fear and apprehension, but also kind of give you some skills. And then I'll be talking about some of the supplies that we have on the table for that. So we're going to talk about feelings and emotions, God's design for sex, preparing for exposure, dealing with temptation, processing exposure, and leveraging your story. Now, the important thing to remember is that there is an important order to these, but it's also cyclical, right? So it's not like you're going to have 6 conversations with your kids and you're done, right? It's a relationship. But there is a reason that we're going to want to start with feelings and emotions, and we're going to go through that. So our workshop goal is, what is your next best step for each child that you have? Right? It's not like, I want to do all of this right now. It's what's your next best step? What conversation should you start with? What resource will help most, right? So again, I'm going to give you a lot of information, but you all know me, so you can talk to me every Sunday. But also we'll have the resources. And like I said, I, as a guy who does this presentation all the time, I'm using the resources because they're really helpful. In your packets, you should, on the right side, you should have this handout. This is a handout that gives you a lot of names of resources. Some of them belong to BeBroken, some of them don't, but it's all resources that we do recommend and find to be very helpful for parents. All right, so the first one we're going to look at is feelings and emotions, right? Well, okay, we're talking about sexuality. Why are we starting with feelings? So feelings are a training ground for talking about sexuality, right? Because emotions are personal, They get your child used to talking about personal things, right? So in one aspect, it's a very good preparation for having some of those more difficult conversations later, because you're starting to build with that. And you don't want to discuss sexuality with a child until your child is comfortable talking feelings with you, right? So we've had some cases where parents come to us, with a teenager and things are already bad, and we have to say, okay, you got to take your time here. We can't address the sexuality issue yet because we need to build that relationship first, so that way you can actually work with your kid and address it. So feelings, emotions are really important to do. If you're like me, I didn't really do feelings and emotions at all until I was 39, 38, right? And now I'm learning how to do emotions on my own life, and now working with my kids to do them as well. Unless it was anger. I knew anger very well. So why emotions? Childhood development research is in agreement that emotions play a foundational role in the development of either resilience or problematic sexual behavior. Right? Emotions and sexuality, besides for being a training ground, they're also intertwined. The biggest way that sexuality becomes broken and misguided is because a child doesn't know what to do with strong emotions. So how do we have these conversations? So I'll stop there for you. Different age groups, different ways to start approaching it, right? 3 to 5 year olds, expand feeling vocabulary. 6 to 7, identify what they're feeling. 8 to 10, find better ways to respond to feelings. 11 to 18, connecting feelings with temptations. Told you I was going to throw a lot of stuff at you. Don't worry, all right? We're going to take a step at a time when you actually get your own kids. So young children, expanding vocabulary, right? We want to get beyond just mad, sad, and glad. Which when I was 38, I did mad really well. I didn't do sad or glad very well. I actually had to expand beyond that one emotion, anger, to do that. But again, there's different ways that we can do that. One way is with a feeling faces chart. You can Google that, feeling faces chart, and you'll find it. We actually have an example of that one actually on the table. One side has boy faces, one side has girl faces, which is just the hair. Tell the difference between the hair. But again, you can do different ways to do that, right? So you can have a child, you can say to the child, hey, what does your face look like when you're happy? And the child can give you a smile, right? So you can do that. You can have the sheet and say, what do you feel right now? Right? They can point to a feeling face, even if they can't necessarily read, right? So there's different ways you can use this tool to help them. You can share your emotions with your child, right? Well, right now, I'm feeling kind of embarrassed. You can point to the picture and tell them why you feel embarrassed, right? So again, this is a great tool just to help them to see what emotions can look like as you also model it for them. So middle children, you start working with finding better ways to respond. And so you have emotional care tags that can be very helpful with that. When I blank, I am feeling blank, I need blank. So, example is, and this is right where you help the child fill in these things. So usually you'll start with, they're kind of one-eyed. So when something's happening, well, maybe the child is crying a lot. Okay, well, when you cry, what are you feeling? You help them realize what they're feeling. What do you need? Right? Well, I need a hug. Right, now, is crying bad behavior? No, right? Sometimes it's annoying behavior for us as parents, but it's not bad behavior. But it's obviously showing that they need something, right? Well, what do they need? They might need a hug. Maybe a different kid's going to need time alone, right? The kids are going to have different needs. When I hit, now is hitting bad behavior? Yeah, hitting's bad behavior, right? So we want to change, we definitely want to change that, right? This one we want to deal with constructively. This one we also want to deal with constructively, but we also want to change it. What's going on? Well, maybe the kid has a lot of hitting issues because they're feeling overwhelmed and they don't know how to deal with it. Okay, help them realize what they need. I need space. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, right, and it starts to work with the kid, okay, let's get you to have some space.
Matthew? So, in some of these, obviously, a kid's not gonna be like, you know, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need space.
Right.
You know, so I think what you're saying is we as parents need to figure out how we can see the first two
Mhm.
and then coax them toward finding out what they need, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
right, because again, you're building this off of relationships. So it's not like you give your child this care tag one time, you talk with them one time, and then they carry it around and they're gonna get it perfect every time.
Yeah.
You might need to step in and say, hey, I see you're crying. What are you feeling right now? And maybe they're gonna say, maybe they're starting to understand, okay, disappointed. Okay, last time you said you need a hug. Do you need a hug? Right? Or if they're hitting, you can kind of go to, okay, let's give you some space. Right? So you're helping them do it, but they also begin to start recognizing it in their own lives, right? So that's kind of what you were saying before with the ages, right? You're moving, because we're talking about kids getting a little bit older, starting to be 7, 8, 9, where they can start moving from parents telling them what to do because they need the parents' guidance or commands almost, to now getting to the point of, okay, I can start learning this myself with my parents' guidance, right? So good.
So we're developing the understanding in the child of what's a right emotion, a correct emotion,
Yeah.
or an emotion that is distorted because of the situation, and that emotion needs to be guided toward one of the other emotions to sort of, help them to understand how to also control their emotions, right? Because we don't want to say that feelings and emotions are by themselves what rule us, right? We still have a will, and we have to be able to teach a child to say, well, that's not really a correct response. That's a response that is distorted by something else, right?
Yep.
The hitting thing, for instance,
Yep.
is a response, but really hitting is wrong at the beginning. So whether or not they're feeling overwhelmed, well, you identify that, right? Maybe it's the brother or the sister who are causing it.
And that's the thing, we want with our kids, we want to help them identify their feelings without feeling the shame about their feelings, right?
Right.
Because if we're starting to teach them shame about, well, you shouldn't feel that way, guess what happens? When they feel that way, they're going to keep it to themselves and they're going to keep hitting because they don't know how to actually deal with that and help lead themselves to a different place. Yeah.
So one of our children has a very strong, somewhat explosive personality. And
You don't know that.
so we worked with this child with emotional care tags a few years ago. And at this point, this child is older, and when this child is feeling whatever they were feeling, now they come and ask for a hug because that was their particular need. So just,
It works.
it works like over time,
It takes time, yeah.
but it is like, it's going from the parent supporting this process to the child incorporating that into themselves and then asking for what they need, which, I don't know, I never knew how to do.
Right? Okay, so what negative way do you sometimes react to feeling overwhelmed? Who wants to do this with me? Who's my guinea pig? Anyone? We're gonna go with Nate, because Nate hasn't talked yet. Nate, you're feeling overwhelmed when what? What's usually happening?
When I run away.
When I run away, we need to talk to Kira about this. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, what do you need?
I don't know.
It's harder as an adult to figure it out.
Grace, patience.
Grace, patience, give me a hug.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so we don't touch Nate.
Problem is when I'm overwhelmed, then I probably space, but that's why I run away.
Right, but there can be a difference, right, between an unhealthy running away and a healthy I need space.
So that's the problem.
Right.
Where,
You have 3 little
well,
kids,
where
right?
that line is and whether
Yep.
me running away is actually me avoiding or whether it's me
Right.
getting the space I need, whether that's right or not.
Yep, and so right, because emotions are complicated, right? And so you need people to help you figure that out and talk through it, especially when you're a kid, right? And that doesn't mean like, okay, so Nate has an example where he's not sure himself. That doesn't mean he can't help his children. Actually, because he has his own struggles, that helps him to help his children because he recognizes how difficult it is. Thank you, Nate. Older children, right? And it's you two were kind of starting to get us a little bit there, right? As kids are getting older, we can improve identifying feelings, right? So we have kind of our, seven basic feelings: bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, and surprised, unless you were me when I was 30 and angry was the only one. We have our basic, right? And so, this is a typical understanding of emotions for a healthy kid, okay? Right? Like, because even a healthy kid, this is about what they can handle. Like, if you ever saw the movie Inside Out, all of a sudden all the emotions come out, right? As a kid starts getting into teenage years, we're going to be able to start going beyond this, right? And so we can help our children begin to understand. It's usually more dramatic than it works. More complicated emotions. Now again, this isn't just to build up our vocabulary, right? Like, well, I know all 5,000 emotions really well and I can teach all of them. No, what it does is it helps us to start realizing, well, what am I really feeling? Because what am I really feeling is going to help with, what do I need? What should I do with that? Is it a distorted emotion or is it a correct emotion? Anger can be a correct emotion, right?
Yeah,
There's
because
things
there
we
are-
can be angry about legit, but what are we doing with them?
There are emotions that can be used to manipulate other people,
Right.
especially parents will find this with their children, manipulating them through emotions. So we have to be careful as parents to identify a manipulative emotion and an emotion that is sincere and from the heart from the child. And that's not always easy to identify, but as a parent, you should be able to eventually figure that out.
Yeah, and
doesn't work.
What's that?
Guilt doesn't work all the time.
guilt doesn't work all the time.
Always.
But wait, so this is gonna help us, right, to be able to dive deeper. And so actually I started using this as an adult, because I didn't know anything beyond angry or mad. And so I don't do it as much as I used to, just because I think I've grown a lot, but I should still do it more because that's gonna be helpful. But like if I'm feeling something and I'm not quite sure what it is, I'm gonna pull that out and figure out what it is, so it doesn't control me. Right, so the emotion doesn't control me. Right, so I remember one time, when I was still kind of going more beyond just angry and mad, right? So something happened then where my typical response would have been angry. And I'd been doing some of this work for a while, and all of a sudden I realized that I was really sad about something. Right? Okay, so I'm still in the inner circle, but that's a big step, right? To know what the inner circle. And I realized I'm not angry, I'm sad. And then all of a sudden I got really happy because I was feeling sad. Because all of a sudden I was actually feeling something besides her anger. It was sadness, but I became happy that I was feeling sadness. It was the weirdest moment, but it was also really freeing. To realize I can have these different emotions and feelings going on and can learn what to do with them. So again, there's different ways you can use something like this, and I have an example out on the table. You just Google feeling wheel, and there's all different versions of it, but they're all basically the same idea. So what was the last time you felt angry? And what made you feel angry? Right, you can ask that to your kid. Like when they're not angry, right? Have that conversation, or pick a different feeling. And then what you do with these kind of things is what word in the middle or outer row comes closest to the deeper feeling you had, right? So you can even move beyond angry. What kind of angry did you feel?
Aggressive.
Right? Maybe you got disrespected. You're angry because someone disrespected you. Well, now you know. Now you can deal with that anger better because you understand what it's coming from, right? So this helps to not just have a big vocabulary, but to actually start understanding what you're feeling, so you can deal with it a lot better. Adolescent children, again, as they're getting older, you can use an emotional care plan. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth later in the presentation. These are different resources that we offer at BeBroken to help with different ages. We have some online courses. So really for any ages, we have the emotional resilience course. Ages 8 to 12, we have Honest Talk the Game, which is really cool. I play with my kids, and it's interesting because there's a score and you can kind of win. And when we first started playing it, the kids would, and I didn't even realize this at first, they told me, they would actually ignore the feeling questions and just go with the questions where they could get more points, which actually usually the harder questions are the ones with more. And they would do that. But now, they play it and they actually answer some of the difficult questions. Or they'll, if the kid has a little competitive nature to them, okay, they're going to try to get the points, so they're going to want to do the harder questions, right? So it can be really fun. Just between us is actually a parent-child journal. For some kids, right? Some kids love to talk. Right? We have some of those kids in our house. They love to talk and process things out loud. Some kids love to write. So maybe the best way to do your relationship with your child is to write back and forth to each other. And we've done that at different times with some of our kids. And so that actually kind of helps guide it a little bit as well to have those conversations. So you can check that out on the table too. All right, so that's the first major conversation. But again, it's an ongoing conversation. Next is God's design for sex, right? Yes, conversations about God's design for sex are important to have with your children. And yes, I will be getting nuanced with that, right? We're going to go into some detail there. So by show of hands, as kids or teenagers, how many learned most of what you knew about sexuality from something other than your parents? Most of us. And that's the problem we want to change. That's the issue we want to change, right? One fear that parents have about talking to their kids about sexuality is that it will ruin their innocence. Well, since when does knowing something about God and God's design ruin innocence? Right? I mean, Father was talking about Deuteronomy 6. Make sure your kids learn about these things. Well, the Old Testament talks about sexuality. So we're commanded to actually talk about some of these things with our kids. Right? Now, again, we need to be age appropriate, right? We're not going to just dump all this stuff on our kids at a young age. But it's the world that ruins our kids' innocence. It's the world that teaches them the wrong things about their body and about their emotions and about their sexuality. And so we need to teach them before that and against that. So again, some ideas. You usually between ages 3 and 6, you're going to learn correct name for body parts.
Okay, first one. So I'm doing the grandkids, and as they ask to go to the bathroom, just go from the toilet. I say, get your wee-wee point your wee-wee down. That's not my wee-wee, that's my penis. Okay, he corrected me.
Good for
He
him.
thinks like, why are you calling it a wee-wee? Oh, that's so dumb.
It can be a little embarrassing in the YMCA shower where there's stalls, but you can hear everything. And they're like, the two kids are like, don't touch my penis. You put your penis down. You hold your penis here. They just, because it's just what it's called.
Right.
And I actually had, at one point, someone at the Y had said, oh, that's a no-no word. Had told him, why did you teach your kid that word?
Because it's the anatomically correct name for that thing, right?
I mean, what do you want me to tell them? It's their Johnson? What am I supposed to tell them?
Right. Because when you do that, and no offense, Father, when you call it a wee-wee, you're starting to teach shame.
Yeah.
Right? Now, again, I know this because I did it all wrong. When I was a parent of young kids, right, I was embarrassed by those things. But it's important for them to understand their bodies. Because again, if you understand your bodies and how God made you, then you also learn how to submit that to God. Right? 7 to 10, start a little bit of how God makes babies, right? Obviously, you're not going into all the details. 11 to 12, purpose of sex beyond reproduction, right? There's that uniting power for a husband and wife. 13 to 18, what sexuality is for during the teen years, right? Because what the world teaches us is that, well, sexuality for the teen years is going and having sex with everything and everybody you can. That's obviously not what we're talking about. Some books, and again, you have these on the list I gave you. Some good books for preschool. Again, these are not BeBroken resources, but they are very good resources.
Jim Burns used to be a youth pastor guy for years and years with a number of youth. He started a lot of things. So he's really good. Yeah, his stuff's really good.
Yep. And again, Luke Ilkerson's a good one as well. He has a bunch of different stuff at different ages. So Luke does some good stuff there. Those are all listed on the sheets that I gave you. And then, of course, we get into BeBroken stuff as well. The journal. We actually have a father-son accountability. And again, that's not designed for your son to make sure that you're sexually pure, right? But it's to help build that relationship between a father and a son where you can start sharing with each other and helping grow. And so we have that on the table as well. And then, of course, honest talk. So, and this is from Jim Burns. Why is knowing how sex works not innocent? Seeing hardcore pornography ruins innocence, not knowing God's design for sex. All right, so ages 12 to 14. And again, you find a lot of this stuff in Honest Talk. Some of the things that you start teaching your kids is that God invented sex. That it bonds a husband and wife. That it's designed to be selfless. And that there's a spiritual metaphor to it that we see throughout Scripture. For example, spiritual metaphor, the marital union tells the story of God's love and relationship with us. Which is why also so often in the Old Testament and New Testament, we continuously hear God speaking out against sexual immorality because it is such a distortion of reality. There's the pursuit, the joint vow to unite forever, entrance, mutual joy, new life created. Isaiah 62:5. For as a young man marries a virgin, your builder shall marry you. And as a bridegroom rejoices in his bride, so shall your God rejoice in you. Right? And this has been a shift in my own thing, especially coming into the Orthodox Church, where we even talk about, the fathers talked about, when Mary was a virgin. We see that in the Old Testament because the entrance into the temple, we have actually a lot of sexual imagery in a lot of the things that we talk about. And that was weird for me at first. Why? Well, because I was into pornography for 25 years and I distorted my thinking, right? And so it's hard for me. But now as God's cleansing me and changing me, I'm starting to realize, okay, God did this. He created our bodies. Right? He's given us marriage. He's given us that enjoyment in marriage that unites a husband and wife. It is not a dirty thing, even if I made it that for years. So when we choose not to teach our kids, they're going to find out on their own.
That's an important point.
But even more important is most of the time it's going to find them out. All right, so if you combine all the major sports leagues in America, so NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, what am I missing? NBA, hockey, NHL. You combine those businesses and the money that runs through those businesses, right? Billions and billions and billions of dollars, it is dwarfed by the porn industry. The porn industry is billions, and it's designed like a drug dealer. It's designed to go after people, especially after our kids. Right? When the pandemic started and everything was getting shut down, Pornhub started handing out free subscriptions. That's a drug dealer move.
I remember that.
Get you hooked, get you caught, right? Pornhub, which is being dismantled every day, it's great. There's some great litigation out there. Texas signed a law recently that said porn websites have to verify age. It's kind of common sense, right? You have to confirm that the user is 18. Pornhub pulled out of Texas entirely because they can't get their product to little kids now. There's been investigative reports of people in head up in Pornhub admitting that they throw in LGBTQ plus elements into their porn to try to distort the thinking of kids, right? So these are industries that target our children, target us, and we need to be aware of that. So again, we don't just pick a day and dump all these facts on our kids. We're building a relationship with them. We need to intentionally build that relationship with our kids, be proactive so that when they have questions, they can ask us. I hear from parents a lot, and I was one of these parents as well, where I would have said, oh, my kids can talk to me about anything. What we found is unless we are intentional about emotions, unless we are intentional about sexuality in the body, our kids are not going to ask us, even if they talk to us about other things. We have to bridge that conversation. All right, so the next video is Gerald. He's a Protestant pastor. He did missions work for a while. He's talking about a time with his son. His son was 11 at the time. So just listen to what Gerald says. And my speaker went off.
Was that? So a couple of years ago, I was noticing some distance from my son. And I asked myself, why was that? What was going on with him? And I tried my hardest to do things that he liked, to draw him out, to have questions for him, to ask him questions. And I just noticed that he was emotionally withdrawing. And I found myself really struggling with how to connect. Well, a couple months into that time frame, I had looked on his phone and found that he was looking at sexual things. He was trying to figure out the questions of life around sexuality. And so I felt like a less of a man. I felt fearful. I felt anxiety. Did I let him down? Did I not address this soon enough? I didn't even know these questions existed. He was still preteen. So I didn't know what was really going on and where I had let him down. Well, I picked up Father-Son Accountability by John, and we started going through the chapters of it. And what I anticipated a conversation around sexuality to cause friction and division amongst us, like me and my son, I realized this was a conversation that actually brought us together, that it unified us, that he felt safe to ask the questions that he needed to, that he felt confident that he can come to dad and not to the neighbor boy or to Google or whatever for some of these answers. And so it became a real defining moment for he and I as we wrestle with the teenage years. And today we're actually super close because of that conversation coming out. The questions that he asks, the ideas that he has, he's more likely to bring those to me than to go somewhere else today. And so I'm very thankful for that.
All right, so the third conversation, preparing for exposure. And so we also need to get our minds beyond just pornography when we're talking about this, right? Because exposure means more than just exposure to pornography. Obviously, predators sexualize media, right? Even if it's not quote-unquote porn, there's still that. Erotic literature, right, we had mentioned before. Sexual jokes. Objectification, right? These are things that we, in our culture especially, we don't necessarily even think about as exposure, but they are, right? And the fact is, kids are going to be exposed to all of it. Well, hopefully not predators, right? Obviously that's less chance, but usually by the time a boy gets to be 18 in America, it's like 92% of boys have been exposed to pornography. 86% of girls, right? So we want to protect our kids, right? We want to keep it from happening if we can, and we want to try, but we also need to recognize the fact that they're going to hear a joke. They're going to have a friend with a phone. They're going to, right? And so it's going to happen. We do need to prepare for it. Sooner is safer. It's better to explain porn to your kids a year early than 5 minutes late. Which is hard to do because we can't see the future. The average first age of exposure to pornography, let alone sexual jokes or objectification, for boys is between 8 and 10. First exposure to pornography. Which is terrible. So we want to teach them how to turn away, right? And how to get away from it. Again, preparing for exposure, early ages 3 to 5, we're talking about body safety. Again, the fact that your son knows what a penis, or your son knows what a penis is, that's great. That is a huge, huge step for them. 6 to 7, what you might see here and what to do. 8 to 10, pornography, jokes, objectification, what to do. 11 to 18, obviously you want to continue those discussions and have those discussions. So again, we have some good resources all on the list that I gave you that can start helping. Obviously, preschoolers, talk to them about kids' bodies so they know their body. Age 7 to 9, good pictures, bad pictures. We did this with our kids, some around that age, some later, but that's a great, great book. Highly recommend it. We just read it together as a family, like a chapter every week or whatever. And that was really, really good. So we were doing this, and one of my children, see, we won't say names because we don't want to embarrass them. I think it was the same child that you were talking about. But one of our children, we went to the book, got an understanding what pornography is and how to deal with it, right? And what it says is, I'll tell you kind of the steps, but you teach them to turn away and teach them to come talk to you, let them know, right? Let you know. So a few days later, we're at Walmart, and this child, I gotta make sure I don't say her name. Or his name, we don't know. Comes up to me and says, "Dad, I just saw pornography." And so I pulled my kid in close. I'll say her because it's still percentage-wise, we're not gonna figure out. So I pulled her in close and said, "Thank you so much for telling me. What happened? What did you see?" Well, I was going through the underwear section, and I saw the underwear ones. Yeah, that's sexualized media. Is it pornography? No. But is it needed? I don't think so. But the fact was, she had learned what to do about it. Turn away, come talk to Dad. And she knew she was safe. Here we have some online courses. So actually, we do have an online course if your child has been exposed to pornography or is looking at it. A course that helps you work through that and what to do in that case. So basically, here are the steps, right? If you're exposed, close your eyes. Get away. Come tell me. You will not be in trouble. Okay, we're going to get to this one a little bit later because that's a really, really important key point there. So dealing with temptation, here's our fourth critical conversation. This starts usually around 11 or 12, or whenever you start to sense that your child is dealing with temptation, is getting interested, right? And if you've been doing some of these other things and building that relationship with your kid in this area, you're going to be obviously much more attuned even to this. So quick poll. Who did something, just raise your hand if this is true of you. Who did something as a kid that you later wondered, why did I do that? Oh good, it's not just me. So I was, 6. I had a loving grandfather. He was a great guy. He was a pastor, and so we were having lunch after church one Sunday. The whole family's there, right? Aunts, uncles. It was a huge family. And so, my grandfather's talking to people, and I had this, red Solo cup filled with orange soda. I like orange soda. And so I go over and I sit on my grandfather's lap. This man I loved, admired. He's passed away decades ago now, but still love him and admire him. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Pop, what would happen if I dumped this orange soda on you?" He said, "Well, Matt, you shouldn't do that." So I looked at him, looked at the soda, looked at him, looked at the soda. You know what's coming. Right down. I jumped off his lap, terrified at what I had just done, ran to my parents and just cried until they brought me home. My grandfather was just stunned, right? And my parents brought me home, brought me back a little bit later, and like, he wasn't angry, he wasn't mad, he loved me. Maybe I was just trying to prove that? I don't know. We do stupid things sometimes. Anyone ever do something as an adult and they ask themselves why they did that later, right? We do stupid stuff. It's just, we do. So dealing with temptation, ages 3 to 5, start learning what we want is not always good for us. Don't run into the road. 6 through 7, feelings versus what is better for us and others. By recognizing that our feelings are not the best guide. They're not wrong all the time, right? But they're not right all the time. 8 to 10, feeling brain versus thinking brain. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures gets into that, does a really good job with that. Right, that our brain has the side that just acts on impulse and the side that says, wait a second, let's think about this. 11 to 18, connecting feelings and sexual temptation. So again, some good books that we would recommend, but I want it. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Honest Talk, all good resources, some accountability, some of our online courses as well. But here's basically any book worth its snuff. This is what it's going to teach you. Honest Talk goes through this as well. Here's how our brain works. So, and we've used the male character, but this is the same for men and women, for boys and girls. And this is important. At some point, you want to teach your kids how this works. And I would say this is the most important part of this presentation. All right. So what happens when a child is exposed to pornography, sexting, masturbation, fantasy? They're at the pool and they see someone in a bathing suit. Well, what happens is dopamine floods the brain, and there's arousal, right? Like there's this excitement that builds up. We understand what that means. Now, what happens is when the body starts to have arousal and sexual, dopamine floods the body, it stops all other emotions, or at least all other negative emotions. And negative emotions start to go away during that process. Now, the child, and even the adult, might not recognize this in the moment, but the brain does. The brain remembers things that we don't necessarily remember. That when this happens, negative feelings go away. So later on, something scary is going to happen, right? We can't keep scary things from happening. Obviously, we can probably keep this from happening in front of our kids, but we're not always able to protect our kids. Maybe they accidentally see a scary movie, maybe they're outside at night and a loud noise happens, right? Something's going to scare the kid. And something happens. Now, the normal response, obviously, is kid's going to try to get away from the scary thing or the stressful thing or whatever strong negative emotion happens. They're going to try to get away, but they're going to have those feelings of fear, anxiety, loneliness, whatever is going on. And they're going to, whether it's conscious or not, going to say, I don't want to keep dwelling on this scary thing, this negative thing, this lonely thing, whatever. And that's when the brain's going to kick in, because the brain's designed, God designed the brain to protect us, to help us, right? So the brain's going to come in, and the brain's going to say, I remember something that works. I can help make you feel better. I'm going to protect you. And so the brain's going to remind you what helped get away from those things. And and the kid starts then porn, fantasy, masturbation, sexual arousal. And they're going to start doing this, whether they plan it or not. Right? It could be something that just happens, or it could be something they start planning and thinking about because they start to realize the connection. Either they discovered it or it discovered them. There's going to be sexual arousal, and negative feelings are going to vanish. Then our good friend Pavlov starts talking about what happens, right? The child feels shame for what happened, what they did, right? Because there's always some implicit idea like that something's wrong there. And they're going to start feeling shame, right? So they have the negative emotion, they go to discomfort, they feel discomfort, they go to the source that child helped them out. When they're done with that, now they're feeling shame. What's shame going to lead to? More negative emotions, which goes to discomfort, right? So you end up in a cycle, right? And this is really the addictive cycle, but we can see that at all levels for all people, right? Whether you're someone in need of a 12-step kind of person, like I am, or if someone who's just, dealing with some difficult things. But the discomfort, the negative emotions become stronger and stronger every time, because more is getting built into it without it actually being dealt with. In one study, 23% of boys, underage boys, said they tried to stop watching pornography but could not. That's addiction. Now the brain's set up to protect us, right? So it's going to see the pattern and it's going to start short-circuiting the pattern because it doesn't want to have the discomfort, because it knows the discomfort's not helpful, and so the cycle's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. Kid's going to start thinking there's something wrong with them because all they do is think about sex. There's going to be shame, and it's just going to keep spiraling worse and worse. Right? That's how it happens. I actually had a counselor once tell me, and I think he was right, that I, as a kid, pornography saved my life. Or I would have probably been hanging in the closet. Because of dealing with just the things I dealt with as a kid. Not from my parents, but just from school kids and just public school. And he said, it kept you from hanging in the closet. So pornography in one way saved my life. It was my best friend, but it was my best friend that was trying to kill me as well. Right, just over time. So I had to say goodbye to that friend. But right, it's the brain trying to protect us the best it can do. And for a kid, the brain can't do that much. It's got to protect the best it knows, right? So how do we then help break this cycle? What can we do about it? We can actively teach our kids to come to us when they're feeling these negative emotions, when they're feeling discomfort. Hey, what happened? How do you feel? What can I do? Do you need a hug? Do you need some space? Right? And hopefully at this point you've been working with your kids, so you're starting to understand what they need and who they are, right? Because that's going to break the shame. When they can come, right? I mean, just like confession. When you go and you tell Father Daniel what you did that week, it starts breaking that shame so you can actually start healing and dealing with the root causes of where things come from. Same with kids coming to their parents. We need to be that place for them where they can be forgiven, that they can get away from the shame. We can help them resolve negative emotions.
Matthew, it's one of those things that the scriptures talk about when it says to expose the deeds of darkness with the light. So by going to a parent, we're actually shedding light, the child is shedding light on the situation, and that relieves the shame. Because the shame is relieved once the light exposes it. And when you say it to someone else, you essentially bring it to the light.
Yep. And it's also why we talk about emotions with kids when they're younger, so right, to help them resolve what's going on in a healthy and God-honoring way, rather than in an unhealthy way that's also tearing us apart from God. So let's listen to Lucas as he talks about when he discovered this as a kid.
When my dad and I kind of first started sort of quasi-accountability type thing, we realized that when I was walking home from school, on the walk home, I started having problems with like temptation. I'd be tempted to want to fantasize or to think about sexual things, and I'd come home and I'd be like, I don't know what's going on, because like, why is it that when I'm walking home I have this problem? And so I'd come home and talk to my dad about it and kind of going in depth, and he'd ask me questions and I'd kind of talk about it and figure it out. And eventually figured out that what it is that while I was walking home, I would feel like I was alone because there's this period of, because I'm a big extrovert, I love talking, I love having human interaction. I mean, even sitting over there, I have a hard time not whispering to somebody else's ear, but I apologize about that. But, and so, that time walking home, even for 20, 30 minutes, was enough time where I started feeling like I was alone and I had no one to talk to. And so, I had this thing in my mind that, well, fantasy makes me feel better. And so, I'd want to go to that. And so, eventually, in doing accountability and working with him, my dad and everything, we found out that what I could do is that while I was walking home, I would call my dad. And even if he'd be at work, so sometimes he wouldn't pick up, sometimes he wouldn't, we talk about it, but even when he didn't pick up, I'd leave him a message. I'd say, hey, I'm walking home, and I wouldn't even have to say that I was having any temptation. I could just say, hey, I'm walking home now, everything, just calling to kind of check in, see how you're doing, that sort of thing. And then I'd get home, and it's like that was enough that I knew when I get home, he'd talk to me. I knew when I got home, he'd ask me, how it was walking home, how my day was at school, and all that sort of thing. And so that was what we kind of figured out together and what worked for me.
So we want to make sure that talking becomes an ingrained behavior in our kids, hopefully even by 7 or 8. Obviously, it's never too late to start. I started late with my kids, but we want to get them to be able to talk. We want to get to a point where kids can come talk to us, or when we see something's going on in our kids, we can come talk to them and they're willing to respond, right? But again, that just takes practice. That keeps doing it over and over again. That keeps, making sure you're a safe place for them to come. Your child will experience sexual temptation, right? We all do. Temptation is not sin in itself. Your child will fail less often when they have a safe place to talk through their emotions and what's going on. So we're going to do a little bit more information overload because that's what I do. This stuff's also found in Honest Talk and Families Father-Son Accountability, as well as the Game Plan online course. So not all feelings are going to lead to bad behavior, right? Or especially in this case, sexual acting out. It's the strongest ones we don't know how to handle, right? So here's some of those triggers for sexual acting out. Mine is feeling not wanted. Which, by the way, you as a church do a really good job of me not having to deal with this one. But that's what I dealt with. For whatever reason, as a kid, I got this idea in my head that no one wanted me. But porn did. Right? So take a moment to look over this list and do you have one of these that leads you to maybe not necessarily sexually act out, maybe it is sexual acting out, but some other behavior, some other thing that's going on. Again, we talked about, I kind of mentioned briefly the emotional care plan for older ages. This is where we start dealing with this kind of stuff, at least starting to be in this ages, right? You might not struggle with something sexually, maybe you do, but you struggle with something, right? I mean, Father can tell us. Or he can't, but he knows. So you can do this too, right? This isn't just for kids. This can also be for adults. You can actually do this with your kid. You have yours and your older kid has one, right? And you can share with each other, help each other out. Obviously, at certain levels, right? Like I'm not gonna do one for sexuality for myself and do that with my kid, right? I'm gonna do it with a different, hey, when I yell at you, kind of thing. I might do that one. But you can work this. It's something that you need to work on. So you might start with you start with when I'm tempted, or you can start with I might be feeling, depending on kind of what you're at. But the might be feeling would be the core emotional triggers, right? It's the big stuff. It's the heavy stuff that you want to do. So what are you feeling? I feel like failure. I feel unwanted. I feel like I'm not heard. Well, what happened? What are you tempted towards when you're feeling these things? Right? Well, I'm tempted to look at porn. I'm tempted to masturbate to fantasy. You probably never heard the word masturbate said this many times in a church building before that. I'm the sex guy, right? I love watching people squirm sometimes. But then here's the important, right? The I can are the healthier options, the more God-honoring options that you can do or your child can do when they're feeling tempted. Well, I can write my journal to God. I can pray. I can text Dad. I can call Dad. I can come into his office and ask for a hug. Right, so here's just kind of an example. So this can be a formal thing you do, right? With like your kid, you can actually have the card. Again, this depends on the kid's personality and your personality, right? You might not need the card. They might need a card. Maybe you'll do a card because it's helping them, right? But you could do it formally like this. You could do it informally when you're driving, right? Driving's great. Why is driving a great time to have a conversation with your kid? You don't have to look at each other, right? Which sometimes is very helpful for maybe for the adult too, but also for the kid, right? So one of my children, not that one actually. One of my children.
Down more and more.
What?
You're narrowing it down more and more.
Well, no, this is actually different. This is actually a different kid this time. So. Which narrowed the other one down really well, actually. So one of my children, so like when my kids were younger and I would be going to a store, I never wanted to take them with me because I was selfish, right? Like I was a jerk. Now, like I go to the store, like, hey, does anyone want to go for a ride? Like, come on, kids, hang out with me, I'm cool. I still have my issues, but so you know, I'll go to the store. So I asked. So we had this one day, and this one time I had this conversation with one of my kids, and we got to some emotions and some deeper conversation. And then, like a week or so later, I said, "Do you know why I do conversations in the car?" And the child said, "The eye contact thing, right?" The child recognized why. I said, "Yeah, like it helps stay on." So it was like a few days later, I asked that same child, saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Walmart. Do you want to come with me?" "Yeah, sure." We get in the car, I'm backing out, whatever, starting to go up driveway, and I turned and said, "Hey, just so you know, I don't have anything planned conversation-wise." Right? And the child turned to me and said, "Even if you did, that would be okay." They want these conversations, right? They do. They really do. But you have to build up to them.
Yes.
You gotta work it. It's not like they're gonna be ready to tell you everything right now. So what might be one? Don't say these out loud, unless you're really comfortable. What might one core emotional trigger be for you? What feeling causes the most anxiety for you? I'm convinced we all have at least one. Some of us have more than one, like me, right? What is the thing that you really struggle with that probably is a root cause for a lot of your behavior that you don't like? Right? And again, you don't need to share this, but there absolutely needs to be someone in your life who knows it. Father being one, someone else being number two, right? So that when you're dealing with things, like you can actually go to that person and talk to your stuff. All right, processing exposure, right? So you've been building a relationship with your kid, you've been preparing them for exposure, and it happens, right? It's gonna happen at some level. This is our temptation. Right? We find out it happened and we get mad. We get angry. We blow up. I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day who told me about their first experience when they found out and they didn't do this, and I was so excited. I was like, "You got it right. That's awesome." But most of us are probably going to go to this, right? But we can't. Anger is an inappropriate response to finding out our child has been exposed, whether they sought it out or it sought them out. It indicates fear. Your child needs an ally. Now, the pushback is, but what they're doing is wrong. And we want to stop that behavior. Not arguing with that. That's absolutely true. The behavior's wrong, we want to stop it. But what is most important in that moment? Punishing our child or helping them stop? Because I can guarantee you, punishing them is going to make it worse. Because it's going to then build the shame and it's just going to keep burying inside. So what's a likely reason a parent might internally feel anger upon discovering their child has accessed pornography?
The parent feeling like they failed the child, and it comes out as anger.
You're just going to give like the number one answer right away, right? Remember Gerald said, I felt like a failure. Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of times we're mad at ourselves. And there might be other reasons too, right? I think that's usually the biggest one. Now, here's the good news. It's never too late to fix it. If you already yelled, you can apologize to your kid. I'm sorry, that wasn't safe for you. I shouldn't have reacted that way. You know, if we aren't perfect, we can't expect perfection from our kids. And our mistakes can model how to deal with mistakes and sins, right? Because when we show our child, you know what, we own up to what we did wrong, we're teaching them to own up to what they did wrong. It's never too late to fix your response. It's never too late to help your child. Harder as they get older, but never too late. So my children can actually joke about angry dad now, because I used to be angry dad. There's still moments that I have to like catch myself. They're less and less. But they can joke about angry dad now. And they tell some whoppers. And I'm like, I don't even remember that time because I was so angry I don't even remember it. But we've worked through that. There's still damage there from it. But we've worked through a lot of it. But I feel like my son is a monster. Because he says he won't do it again, and I found out he did it again. It's not your child's fault that porn was created. Your child is not a monster. Your child is a victim. Billions of dollars of industry coming after them. Now yes, at some point, your child is they're responsible for their behavior, right? We're not saying that you're never responsible for your behavior. But it's better to start with the understanding of your child being a victim. Not a victim mindset, right? We don't go, well, we can't do anything about anything. But we do recognize your child's a victim, that we can help them with that. We can help realize that they're not this evil being doing these evil things, but that bad things have happened to them and we want to help them get over them. All right, really important understanding that. So just like we take a bath to clean our outside, talking helps deal with things inside, right? Well, why we do confession in the church. But when we're talking to our kids, we can ask them questions like, what have you seen or heard? What mistakes have you made? How did it happen? How did you feel? What did you think about that? Do you have any questions for me? What can we do next time? Let's pray about this, right? We want to have those conversations to help our kid process through these things. And I notice, like, Father sets a good example of that when I do confession. Like, he doesn't just say, okay, what'd you do? All right, let's pray for you, right? He, like, talks through it. That's a really good model. But we want to be, a true ally to our child, not the word ally that's been co-opted by the world. We want to actually be their true ally and help them. Remember, it's not lecturing. We don't need to lecture our kids about sexuality. We need to have that conversation so we can lead them and guide them. Your child will be repeatedly exposed to sexual contamination. Cleansing takes place through talking. So let's talk about the judgment-free zone, the you will not get in trouble thing. Teenagers want and need to have a judgment-free zone. Right? So when parents say it will be judgment and punishment-free, kids will open up more, if they believe. Right? We have to set that example that it's true. Right? Loneliness is one of the biggest reasons why kids look at porn, and punishment's only going to increase the loneliness or the, any of those emotions. Right? So we want to be able to say to our kids, like, you can tell me these questions. What questions do you have? What did you do? What are you feeling? We need them to be able to freely say those so we can actually help them deal with it, not just say, oh, you did that, you're in trouble. Right? Now there's boundaries that get set and things like that, but we do that. Remember, one of the kids' fears is I'll get in trouble for what I say or ask. They won't talk if they think they're going to get in trouble. And although we might not want to hear the things that they have to say or ask, it's better if they say them to us, because they're going to say them to somebody. Right? And like I said, sometimes it needs to be consequences, right? There needs to be boundaries that set up, but it's very different than punishment. And of course, sometimes the kids aren't going to recognize that, right? But we work with them to know that we are a safe place and that we are trying to help them. I need to finish up here. Normally, I can actually do this presentation in 45 minutes, believe it or not. But we've been having a lot of fun. So, leveraging your story. Remember that parents fear, one of the things that parents fear is that their kids are going to find out about their past. Why? Why do we fear that our kids are going to learn about our past?
Because if dad did it, then they might turn out the same way.
Okay, yeah, there's that. Setting a bad example, right? Disappointing them.
Or you think that they won't look up to you anymore because you've been a bad person.
But our failures are what qualify us to talk to our kids about sexuality and life in general. Because we get it. We understand. We've been there. Now again, we don't phrase things in a way that say, well, I did this and I turned out fine. Right? You can help them see the brokenness and the pain that resulted from our behavior. Perfect person is unapproachable unless, Jesus. You have this thing going, right? But for us, if we pretend we're perfect, we're unapproachable. Because we're not.
So like normally when Matt does this talk, he's talking to Protestants, and Protestants, as far as much as we love them, they're kind of missing the saints. And like one of the strengths of the Orthodox Church is we have saints that we look up to, that are models for our life. And the reason that they're models for our life is because we know all the junk that happens and how they turn to God. Like St. Mary of Egypt's perfect example, right? If she was afraid of people finding out about her past, think about how much we would have lost as a church. So, as Orthodox Christians, I think we have an advantage for thinking about failures from our past, because this is, when we go to God, we turn to God and He's sanctifying us. This is what makes us into saints, so we can help our children see that from our own life as well.
Thank you, Catherine. I gotta try to speed through this here because I'm running out of time. But in the Bible shows us some of those things, right? Fotini, Peter, Paul, right? The Bible doesn't hide their lives. The saints don't hide their lives because we can learn from that.
St. Moses.
Yeah. Moses the Ethiopian, my guy, right? He was messed up. That's why I picked him. Or he picked me, I'm not sure which. Remember, kids fear parents won't understand how I feel. But we do. Why? Because we've been there, and you know what? Some days we're still there. Alright, there are some ground rules. Right? Number one, if you are still caught up in porn or sexual acting out and haven't begun working on it, you are not ready to talk to your kids about it yet. Okay? BeBroken can help you. Please talk to me. Like I said, we help men with unwanted sexual behavior. We do have partner ministries that we do refer women to. Because more and more women are having, especially younger ages, are having struggles in this area. So, come talk to me. 2, don't tell your child things your spouse doesn't know. Okay? Do not put them in that position. 3, don't give inappropriate details. And you're playing like, well, where's the line? Number 4, if their eyes get big and their mouth goes wide open, stop talking, you've given too many details. Okay? But that's the thing, you're building that relationship with your child. You're going to start to know them. You're going to be able to start to read them better. That'll help a lot. For younger children, again, you do different ways, different ages. That happened to me too, and I felt, right, if you're just kind of connecting with them. Middle-aged children, you start telling them before they're exposed so they know they can come to you, right? I want you to tell me if that happens. The first time that happened to me, right? And again, this isn't just in sexuality, we do this with everything. Older kids, try to tell a story that relates to what your kid confesses. Again, you don't want to talk too much, you want to get them talking, that's the point. But you relate to them, right? I'm so glad you told me when I was your age, yada, yada, yada. Again, some resources that help with that. Your failures are what qualify you to talk with your children about sex. Your stories are the leverage for deeper relationships with your kids. Again, the saints model that beautifully for us. Thank you. You switched me from Protestant talk to Orthodox talk. All right, so think back to your own first exposure to pornography. I'm going to assume everyone in this room was exposed. If you haven't been, awesome. How old were you? How did it happen? What feelings did you have? Were some of your feelings conflicted? Which means you felt shameful, but you also felt really good. You can understand what our kids feel. Automatic turn off.
Knowing my parents have gone through similar things, as a kid, what I really want to know is that my parents have gone through the same things as me. Knowing my parents have gone through similar things makes me feel less abnormal. Knowing that they went through and maybe got through what I'm going through gives me more hope.
So again, that's our critical conversations. Obviously, this is an ongoing process. This is relationship building with our kids, right? Again, we definitely want to start here, but we build, we grow. Again, the training goal is what's our next best step. And your next best step might be saying, Matt, what's my next best step? Right? We can make that our next best step if we need to. And I'm going to say, I don't know. No, I'm not going to. I'll have a good conversation with you. What conversation to start with? What resource will help most? Again, there's an order to it, but it's also cyclical. So next steps. Is this on that paper? I don't think it is. Or no, it might be. Yes, I think it is. This kind of lists some of the resources and different things. If it's not, is this on there? No. Okay, this is really good then. Anna's going to take a picture of it and send it to everybody. Or something like that. But pretty much this lists a lot of the books and things like that you do have on that list, right? So good stuff as well. All right, so here's now the list that we have. Preschool, or different ages, wherever. Okay. Sorry. Next steps. Yeah, so you have the sheet that you do have that does have broken down to different age levels and different books that are going to help you out as well. This book has everything we discussed. as well as activities. It's a great book to have. You can get that on the table if you want. Also check out purelifeacademy.org. That's our online courses. They're really interactive. They're really good. They're not just like, listen to someone drone for an hour. They're like, usually each lesson is like a few minutes and says, okay, now go talk to your kid, right? So it's good stuff. Partner ministry that we have, they have what's called the Wise Phone. So it is, like this, I don't care how much you can lock it down, your kid's gonna figure out how to unlock it if they want to. Okay? Even if they're not trying to be bad, they can just figure out how to unlock it. Wise Phone, you can't, because they put their own operating system on it. So all it is a clock, calculator, maps, camera, and settings. And even with the text, I don't think it allows pictures being sent. So, I've heard of adults who get this phone for themselves so they're less distracted, which I kind of love. I have some flyers about that there if you want to look into that. Again, that's not us, but it is a great group. Questions? We are kind of out of time for mine, but is it okay if we take